Excellent. Welcome, everyone. This is an exciting opportunity for us to have with us today author and business owner John Warrillow with basically Value Builder Systems. I'm excited to have John here. I've met John on a number of occasions, and so this is going to be an exciting conversation and chat that each of you get to, I guess, enjoy and participate in. One of the things that I'd like to do as we begin and introduce John is point out that he's written two books, Built to Sell and Automatic Customer. And one of the things that I want to stress is that each of these books are wonderful for the business owner to be able to focus on things that they need to be doing to work on their business. And as I introduce John, one of the things that I want to stress is he is a wonderful, kind man that I've had the privilege of meeting on a variety of occasions. And you've always impressed me as to your warmth. You're someone that is very approachable and very inspiring. So thank you for being with us today, John.
It's very kind of you, Roger. I'm just waiting for my invitation to ski in Utah, so I'm trying to warm you up for that.
Done. Greatest snow on earth, come out, and I will be a very good host to you.
Good deal.
So one of the things that I'd like to do as we get started here is just kind of set the stage. We have individuals that are business owners, people who have put a lot of time and energy into building their companies, and I can't speak enough of the sweat equity that they put into their business. They have a dream, they have a desire to build something, offer a product or a service that they're quite passionate about. And as they build their business, they so often get kind of sucked into the revenue strategies of the company, the logistics of what's going on in the business. And it may sometimes distract them from what it is truly they're doing, is building an asset. And John, one of the things that I think that you speak very, very powerful about is building that value in the business. And so just to kind of set the stage, why don't you just kind of give a brief synopsis of what brought you to the point of wanting to help business owners build value in their companies?
Well, yeah, I mean, it's something that I feel very passionate about, probably because I made the mistake of not thinking about it. I was, this goes back to 1996, so a long time ago now, but I ran a graphic design studio called Acre Creative Group. We did brochures and so forth. We had two clients, I remember IBM and Royal Bank. And we got in the business up by about 2000. I'd gotten the business up to about, call it about $1 million in revenue, maybe $150,000 of profit. And I can remember thinking, well, you know, at the time, NASDAQ was at 5,000 and WPP Group, which was the big agency holding company, like our sort of, benchmark, if you will, similar industry, was trading at 20 times EBITDA. And so I thought, okay, well, I've got $150,000 of EBITDA. So 20 times 150,000 is like $3 million. I'm thinking, you know, this company at the time, by the way, I was probably 25 or 27 or something. And I thought, okay, well, this business is worth $3 million. And I remember I had a board meeting and I wanted to have the board members of our company, I had two board members, invest in the business. And so I figured, well, it's worth $3 million. So if I sell them 10%, they should be willing to give me $300,000. And so I made this pitch to the board, and the two guys who were sort of seasoned entrepreneurs looked at each other and said, well, John, I mean, they looked at each other and then looked over at me and said, John, I would never invest in this business if it was the last business on earth. I mean, this thing, you've got two customers there. It's totally dependent on you. There's no continuity to your revenue. Your business is worthless. And, to your point earlier about this is, I put a lot of blood, sweat, and tears in this business, or at least I thought I had at that point. And to hear that after 4 years of work, it was essentially worthless in their minds was a very tough message for me to hear. And I think a lot of entrepreneurs, frankly, feel this, get that message at some point or another, whether they take their business to market or, it lands on them at a different time in their career where they realize that they've been chasing revenue, but not necessarily what drives value. And of course, those two things can be quite different. And so that's, that personal, that experience a long time ago now is really what drove me and continues to drive me today to build Value Builder.
Well, one of the things that really excites me about Value Builder is the fact that at the end of the day, I think we're really helping business owners accomplish one of the core things that they intended to do when they started their company, is build something of value. They had an exit strategy in mind, I'm sure, and it may have been in the far distant future, but as we grow older, we realize time comes quite quickly. And so all of a sudden now it's a reality, the exit strategy succession plan that many need to be considering. Now, I want to go back to something that you just briefly commented on and revisit it. You spoke of revenue. One of the things that I've noticed as we've worked with our clients is that there are businesses out there that put a lot of time and energy into growing the business on the top line, the revenue. And they come up with very creative ways of producing new products and services that the customers will pay for. And they experience year over year this growth in the revenue. But what is unknown to the rest of the company, who are busy and happy and seeing all this growth, is oftentimes the owner is witnessing that the profit is becoming less and less and perhaps non-existent, because they're putting so much money into the expenses of hiring people, marketing more aggressively, and all of these costs that they incur as expenses the employees are perhaps not aware of. They're just seeing that they're busier and doing more work and there's more revenue coming in. But at the end of the day, the business owner isn't being profitable. Let me start there with that scenario and have you speak to how that really can affect value, because they think they're growing, they're building a business, but the value isn't going to be there.
Yeah, I think it comes down to the idea of becoming diluted as you grow by too much cross-selling and too many new products. A lot of businesses, when they start with a product or service that the owner feels deeply passionate about, and they reach a crossroads where they start slowing down in terms of growth, and they think, okay, how do I keep growing? And one of the natural things to do is think about cross-selling, right? So you've got existing customers. The question then becomes like, what else could you sell them? And it's a dangerous road to go down, because as soon as you start cross-selling, what happens is the products that you often are selling are ones for which you are not differentiated on. It's a Me Too product. Your original founding product or service is often one that you have more differentiation around. The cross-selling products are not often ones that you're truly unique in offering. And when you don't have differentiation, it means that you've got more pricing pressure. There are more people that are selling that product or service. Oftentimes it's even a commodity, where it's being priced by the ounce or by the pound or by the hour. And then you're really in a commoditization game, which is where your margins start to shrink, because you're selling against somebody else for that cross-selling product. And then you start to see your revenue grow, but your profit actually stall, even drop a bit, even though your revenue is growing. So your margin is shrinking. And again, in my experience, that really comes down to doing too many things. Instead, you focus on the one thing that makes you really truly unique. I mean, I'll give you an example. You and I both know Stephanie Breedlove. Stephanie came to the Value Builder Summit that we had last year. Yes. And Stephanie was in the business of selling payroll services. And she reached that point where her business started to slow at $300,000 in sales. And so she had a special kind of payroll. They did it for nannies. So young couples who have a nanny, they want to pay them legitimately, they would use Breedlove. So she reaches this point where she reaches this crest or plateau in her revenue at $300,000 in sales. And she has that tough conversation with herself, saying, what do I do to grow the business? On one hand, she could have cross-sold her busy parents other stuff, right? So busy parents need lawn care services. They need snow removal services in the wintertime and so forth. Or she could have done the harder thing, which was to find more parents that have nannies to pay. Now, if she'd gone down the route of selling additional things to her busy parents, she probably could have grown her top line revenue much more quickly. But she probably would have done that at the expense of her margins, because snow removal services is a commodity game, as is cleaning services and so forth. She decided to go down the route of focusing in on continuing to offer payroll services for nannies. And so in the time, grew much more slowly, but was building a more valuable asset. Now, flash forward 25 years, I know it's a long time, but when she went to get acquired, she approached Care.com, which is the Angie's List of care providers. They had 7 million members, all of whom needed to pay their care provider, meaning there were 7 million customers that Stephanie could have gone after. And so when Breedlove sold to Care.com, they sold at a huge premium, something like 6 times top line revenue, which is like a crazy premium because they were doing one thing. And if Breedlove had made that decision 25 years ago to start selling other stuff, she would have been much less attractive to Care.com, because when a company makes an acquisition offer, remember, they're making a build or buy decision, right? On one hand, if they look at your business and say, well, we could easily replicate what that company has done by pouring resources into it, hiring salespeople, whatever, they're not going to buy your business. They're instead going to compete with you. It's only when they look at your business and say, wow, to create what they've created would take us many years and many millions of dollars, would they then consider buying your business? So remember, it's always comes down to that make or basically buy decision. And as long as it's more expensive to make what, or it would take longer or more money to build what you've created, then the option to buy you is going to be much more attractive.
Excellent story. And you're right. At the conference, I was quite impressed with Stephanie's story of how that all came about and her experience and situation in that whole buyout scenario. It was an amazing story, and her being there was quite phenomenal. So I want to go back to something that you shared about your story now, because what we just discussed is obviously having that revenue, but the profits may be dwindling or going away in the growth. But you spoke of, if in your own story, revenue's growing to that million and you having profit, you had the 150,000, but yet those two board members said they wouldn't invest in you because the company was too dependent upon you. So my point is there are examples where I think are companies where they have the revenue growth, they even have the profit that's occurring, but the company is not valued well. It's not worth much at all. And it's basically because of some of these risks that the company is experiencing because of these 8 drivers that we're familiar with that determine the value of the business, and where the company is maybe so dependent upon the business owner, like in your case it does affect the value of that business. Can you speak to the fact that a company can be not worth what it could be or worth less when even there's revenue and profits to be shown?
Oh, absolutely. Well, I mean, you think about it, if you put yourself in the buyer's shoes, the buyer wants to understand, how is your business going to perform once you leave? And so if the business is too deeply dependent on you, the owner, the buyer is rightly going to come to the conclusion that the business is going to perform very poorly without the owner. And so again, when they buy your business, essentially they know you're going to hit the beach or the golf course when you get that big check. And if you can't demonstrate that your business will continue to thrive without you personally, the owner, then there really isn't much a benefit in buying your business. You get down into the asset sale, and not to get too into the weeds of accounting terminology, but the easiest and lowest valuation you're ever going to get for your business is an asset sale, where you simply sell your assets. So for our company, it would be like, my microphone is an asset to the company, my desk is an asset of the company, and I could simply have an auction, bring in an auctioneer, figuratively or actually, and sell the assets to my company. What everybody wants to do is actually sell your company as a going concern, which means that you want to sell your goodwill. And goodwill is not, do your clients like you? It's an actual accounting terminology. It basically is the gap between the value of your assets and the actual value of your business, what someone's willing to pay for your business. So if someone's willing to pay $1 million for your business and your assets are only worth $200,000, your goodwill is $800,000. It's just a calculation. And so what you want to do, I think, what we all want to do as entrepreneurs, is to maximize the value of our business beyond just whatever the assets are worth in our company. Sure, if you've got trucks and vans and a physical location in your business, you'll always be able to sell those, but it will come with the lowest possible valuation for your business. What you really want to do is get a premium for your business by getting that basically goodwill paid for, which is what your business is worth to someone else, beyond just the assets that you have in your company.
That's well said. These are my words, so I'm going to complement what you just shared. I always speak to business owners and say that what they need to be aware of is that their company needs to become a self-sustaining, living, breathing entity that's independent of the business owner. The company acquires worth when the business owner is in a position where they're providing guidance and leadership, where they're providing the vision, and when they're in that capacity and they're outside of the day-to-day operations, working with the customers and the vendors and the goings on of the day-to-day operations, that's when the business is self-sustaining and now worth something independent of the owner. And when a person comes in to acquire the business, they're not concerned that it's going to unravel in their absence, because there's the systems, the processes, the employees in place to sustain the business independent of any one individual. And so that's a key element that we always try to stress when we're talking to our clients, that they need to focus on what they can be doing in their business to ensure that the company is independent of them.
Yeah, no, it's such a good point. It's funny. I've got two young kids. I guess they're kind of not young anymore. They're 10 and 12 years old. And so I'm knee deep in all these parenting books. I don't know if you've made the mistake of reading any parenting books, but it can really send your mind spinning in lots of different directions. And it's really sent me for a loop, because I've been thinking about all the things we've done over the last 12 years, mistakes we've made. But one of the kind of core ideas of a lot of these parenting books is the role of a parent is to take a newborn and basically create a self-sufficient, functioning, positive contributor to the community, adult. You've got 18 years to make that happen. And it's all the little decisions we make along the way and the conversations we have. There's a lot of parallels between raising a business. To your point, it's to create a self-sustaining entity that could survive without you, the owner. And in a lot of ways, parenting is exactly the same. You're trying to create a little person, a little boy or a little girl, and kind of over time and cajoling and coaching and disciplining them to the point where by the age of 18 or 19, they can kind of get along without you. And that's really the goal of any entrepreneur, at least in my view.
I completely agree. And in fact, I'm going to complement what you just shared with an analogy that I always give. There's the Value Builder score. And for those that are familiar with the visualization of it, there's a gauge, and the gauge actually goes from a red line to a yellow and then a green line. And as the business is found in that gauge with the score to be in one of those stages, I've always made it akin that the red area is much like having a young infant child.
Right.
When a business owner has a company that they have to be there every day, nothing happens unless they're in the office. They're interacting with all the employees, the customers, the vendors. It's very much like having a 1-year-old or a 2-year-old that you can't leave alone at the house. Within a moment, they can be in trouble and they can have a problem, an accident. And so the business owner is tied to that business simply because of its infantile nature. The systems aren't in place. It's not mature. Therefore, it's dependent upon that person, just like a child is a parent. But when it moves into that yellow stage, that yellow stage is like a teenager. A teenager can wake up, they can dress themselves, clothe themselves, they can feed themselves, entertain themselves, but they still have boundaries. You have curfews, you still have to give directions and basically have expectations of that child, but they're starting to become independent and they're starting to be a little less reliant upon the parent because they're getting their own self-identity. Well, that's the same as a company getting to the point where you have key employees, you've got key processes that allow things to function in the absence of the owner, where they're able to now attend conferences or go on vacations. But the ideal is when you get to that green stage, when your score is much higher and it's representative of the fact that now you have key people in the business that are in a management state that bring to the table vision and passion that replaces what the business owner was needing to bring originally. And so that's how I've always tried to kind of take that visualization and that business score and make it more relatable to so many of us who are business owners, but also parents.
Yeah, no, I think it's great. And you raised the Value Builder questionnaire. I would encourage every business owner on the call to talk to you about getting their Value Builder questionnaire completed, because I think it's a critical step in this process of building a more valuable company. A lot of times we get the question, well, why would I do my Value Builder questionnaire? I don't want to sell quite yet. I'm maybe 3, 5, 10 years away from selling. Why do I need to do this? The reason I think you want to do it now is there are a few reasons. Number one, even though you don't want to necessarily liquidate your 401k, you probably still look at the investment statement. And it gives you a sense of peace of mind that over time, while you don't necessarily want to sell all the stocks in your 401k, it does give you sort of peace of mind that the value is growing over time. And so for that reason, it can just give you that sense that you are building a more valuable asset. It can expose potentially some of the things that you might want to fix before you go to market. I mean, a lot of us own homes, right? I mean, you can't tell me that you're not a little bit curious when, the house 3 doors down from you that looks virtually identical to yours sells. You're kind of like, well, what did it go for? We all want to know that. Not because we want to sell our houses, but it helps us know the value of our home. And so for that reason, I think completing this questionnaire is really, really worthwhile. It can just give you a sense of where you're at and where you need to kind of work on. And I think if nothing else, that peace of mind to know that you're building a valuable asset.
Well, two things to that point. One, so many of the business owners that I work with are actually taking their money that they have, and rather than diversifying it in real estate, stocks, and commodities, they reinvest it in the company because they oftentimes feel that they are able to influence the value of that investment more than they can in the outside markets. And so they believe more in themselves that they have that control. And so what ends up happening is they keep investing in the business, in the business, in the business. But this is a chance for them to now get an actual valuation of what is that asset worth. And so that's very, very telling. And then to your point of the real estate example, you're right. You may not want to sell your home today, but you need to every so often periodically assess what's going on with your home, because maybe it's time to remodel. Nothing's worse than taking a home that you've lived in for 20 years and preparing to put it on the market, and you have somebody come in and stage the home and put in the new kitchen countertops, paint the walls, maybe put in new carpet, and then all of a sudden you're realizing, hey, this place isn't half bad anymore. I like this. It's modern, it's new, it's fresh. Well, why did you do that in the last few months of living there? You should have been doing that for the last number of years.
It's such a good point.
Yeah, in the business, you want to get to a point where right before you sell it, do you fix all the problems and address the cash flow and fire the one employee that you've always wanted to fire and hire the one person you always should have had? Why are you waiting till the last months to do this, to make your company sexy and appealing? Why not do that years before and live the dream and then sell the business?
It's such a good analogy. It's funny. It hits really close to home because we're renovating right now, and it's sort of being driven by my wife, and I'm going kicking and screaming because I'm like, the house is fine. Why do we need to change it? She's like, no, we got to modernize the bathrooms, the kitchen, and she's right. Of course, right. It's going to be amazing to live in it for 3-5 years before we ever want to sell it. But it's funny you should raise that as an analogy. I think it's true. I think, you want that. I mean, if the business is going to be more valuable that way, there's a reason for that. It's more fun to run, et cetera. So, I think it makes a ton of sense.
Well, let me compliment that. There's actually a television show on TV where they take a homeowner and they bring in one person that's going to renovate the home and another person that's a realtor that's going to go find their dream home. And what the family says is they describe, this is what we're wanting. This is what we'd ideally like to have. We want this kind of a house with these types of rooms. And so then they leave. The renovator is going to renovate the home with the intent of possibly putting it on the market, but they're going to renovate it to the homeowner's current wants. The realtor is going to go out and find a house to meet their wants. Well, what's interesting is they bring the homeowners back and they say, look, we renovated your home. It's now your dream home that you've described. And then the other one says, here's a home we can go buy. And it's what you've described. And it's the terror of the family, the couple now deciding, well, our home that we own is what we want. Are we going to sell it or live in it? And the neighborhood we're familiar with, this is what we want. But I want to make it akin to now the consultative services that a value builder provides when they work as a consultant to these business owners. Because as a family going into a home that's been remodeled and meets your ideal expectations, why sell it now? And more importantly, why did you wait so long? Why not bring in that consultant that could actually help the business kind of take away the rough edges and help you build the business that you want so you can enjoy it before you actually have to sell it?
Yeah. No, it's a great point. I mean, I think a lot of the people that use Value Builder are at a bit of a crossroads, and there may be people listening to this call that feel the same way, where they've kind of entertained the notion of selling their company maybe sometime in the next 3, 5, 10 years, but very few are actually ready to sell. Others are thinking, I might bring in a manager to kind of deal with the day-to-day stuff, letting me sort of take some more time away from the business, work on the strategy stuff. Some are thinking about transitioning to kids or to the management team of their business. So there's that idea of a kind of a management buyout is in the back of their mind. If you think about the one common denominator among all 4 of those strategies, it's, does your business thrive without you? Can it survive indeed without you? Whether you want to bring in a 2IC, a second in command, or you want to sell it, or you want to pass it down to your kids, the one thing you really need to kind of work on is, will it thrive without you? And so again, if folks are out there saying, maybe I'm not ready to sell yet, or I don't want to sell for 5 years, that's no reason not to get your Value Builder questionnaire done, because it really drives to the heart of, can your business survive without you? So like, for example, we look at things like recurring revenue, right? So what proportion of your revenue is recurring? Well, why would that matter? Well, again, when a buyer looks at your business, they want to say, you, the owner, is probably the biggest rainmaker for your company. You're probably the most passionate advocate for what your business does. If you leave, how will the business perform? And one of the ways they get confidence that your company will perform well is if you have recurring revenue. You have recurring contracts or service contracts or subscription revenue, so that they can feel really confident that the business will continue to thrive even when you're not there. And that's one of the kind of building blocks that we feel quite passionately about.
Well, you're getting to the drivers that determine the worth or the value of the business. So I'm going to actually kind of use that as a segue to something that I think is very important. In business, there are times where I think the business owner is a little distracted by what they're building, because they tolerate things in the business that no one else necessarily would tolerate, because they don't know the history behind it. And let me give you an example. On my home, there happens to be a piece of siding that is blown away. It's missing now. And I'm aware as the owner as to why that's the case. I'm fully aware of what it will take to replace it. And unfortunately, I've not yet been able to find the siding, but I'm a little bit more patient because I know what's wrong or why it happened. But if I were to sell my home, I know right off the realtor is going to say, in staging the home, that needs to be addressed, because it's a blight. It's a sign that possibly the homeowner, myself, may have neglected other things in the home, and there might be other concerns that aren't so apparent. And so in a business, when you're actually preparing to sell the business, or if you want to build a business that has value, you always have to be conscious of what are the things that you're tolerating simply because you know the backstory on it. And what I think is in the Value Builder process, the 8 drivers, we're going in and literally looking at, in a company, what are those things that are going to determine whether or not it's at risk and the business is going to be stressed because of this, or is this an asset, something that is a process or a procedure or a part of the company that is helping the business's worth. Yeah. Wouldn't you agree?
Yeah, no, for sure. And so it's one of the reasons that I would take a very clinical eye to how your business looks into the outside world. Because when a buyer goes to evaluate your business, they don't pick up the phone and call you. They actually do a little mystery shopping to begin with. Mystery shopping, as you know, is the act of going out and sort of pretending like a customer. So they actually pretend to be customers in many cases. Yeah. So they'll go to your website and fill in the form requesting more information, or they'll have a sales rep come out to their meeting, or they'll walk into a retail location, and they'll kind of size up how you treat them as a customer as one of the first things they do in due diligence. So if you have that, figurative sort of, hole in your siding, you're going to want to think about your business in that context. So try to go and look at the business through sort of newcomer's eyes. So look at your website and say, is that really the message that we would want a prospective acquirer, not only a prospective customer, but a prospective acquirer to see? Even little things like, where do you, the owner, sit, where you have on a website, our people, and oftentimes it's in a hierarchical presentation, so that the president is at the top and the vice president sales is the next person down, and the kind of bookkeeper is at the bottom. Think about rejigging the order of people so that it's alphabetized. When they complete that form on your website that requests more information, where does that go? Does that go to you, the owner, and do you pick up the phone and call the prospect? If so, a buyer is going to rightly draw the conclusion that your business is too dependent on you personally, the owner, if you're the one reaching out to every outbound inquiry. So again, you want to think about your business on an external basis, almost through optics. What does this thing look like to the outside world? Because that will be, in many cases, an acquirer's first step. They don't pick up the phone and let you know they're interested in buying your business until they've done that preliminary kind of level due diligence, which is really acting as if they were a customer.
Well said. And I'm going to add to that. The one thing that I can definitely say is when we talk about the valuation of a business, so many times like we have today, it comes up with like exit strategy, succession planning, retirement, and so forth. But there's a number of other examples where a business owner is just simply wanting to build a valuable business for the freedom that can bring in their lives. But it's also the idea of maybe a bank is wanting to give them a loan and they're assessing whether or not that company is risky enough for them to give them that line of credit, or maybe it's some venture capital funding that you're wanting to acquire. Maybe it's hiring management and it's somebody looking outside in, and they want to see that in the organization, you've addressed these things, these 8 drivers, and you've built a company that has worth. So what I'd like to do is take what we've discussed as being the Value Builder score and getting that assessment, and talking about the Value Builder assessment report that goes into detail for the client, for the business owner, as to what it is that they are doing in their company that is worth sustaining and brings value to the business, but also the things that could be improved upon, areas of opportunity, I guess.
Yeah, sure. So the Value Builder questionnaire is your first step, right? It's going to show you, where you are at a 0 to 100. By the way, 59 is the average score. So you can immediately see sort of, are you above average, below average, et cetera. What the Value Builder assessment does, it's the second step in the process. And here for the first time, we reveal for you how you scored on each driver and how you'd go about improving your score on each driver. So you get that transparency to know not only that you're doing well on one attribute or not doing so well on another attribute, but you can for the first time see how many extra points you would have garnered had you answered each question on the Value Builder questionnaire in a different way. So for each question that you ask when you complete the questionnaire, in the assessment, we give you the way you answered the question, as well as how many incremental points you could have had built or won, if you will, by answering it in the most positive way. And so you can really start to see, okay, if I was to maximize the value of my business, I'd have to be able to answer this question in a different way. And so that's really the benefit of the assessment, is you can actually kind of get underneath the algorithm that drives the Value Builder score and start to manipulate the dials a little bit. You could use a medical analogy here, since we've been talking about analogies so far. The Value Builder questionnaire might be the equivalent of like you're getting your blood pressure monitored, so you kind of know how you're doing. The assessment is a little bit more like an X-ray. You can actually go in detail and see what's broken, why your arm hurts, and which bone is broken, and how you're going to go fix that. And so that's a really important step in the process.
So when you get the business score, you're now aware of what's going on in the business kind of at a very top level. Here are the things that are contributing of the 8 drivers to your overall score. The report is going to give you more in-depth understanding as to what can be done about it and where you need to perhaps put your time. It's akin to working on the business, which no one else in the organization can really do. It's the owner that can work on the business and provide that vision and direction of how these things are going to be addressed. So share with me, when you work with business owners and you see them applying these principles, what kind of ahas start to appear as the business owner starts to address these things?
Yeah, I mean, Frank Steitley comes to mind. Frank is an entrepreneur based in Washington, D.C. He ran a traditional sort of professional services firm. And working through Module 5, which is called the Automatic Customer Builder, he was able to identify a new recurring revenue stream he hadn't thought of before. He was able to create a $200,000 recurring revenue stream from his existing customers with virtually no additional cost. So that $200,000 went almost directly to his bottom line. Max in South Africa is a Value Builder customer. Max has created a business which will double in annual revenue this year, primarily but because he's gotten out of his own way. One of the things that we have business owners go through, and you'll go through it if you choose to work with Value Builder, is this thing called finding your TVR, teachable, valuable, repeatable. And so we go through an exercise called the Scalability Finder, which is basically essentially trying to get you to to understand what part of your business has the potential to scale. Because for a lot of us as entrepreneurs, the reason our business becomes deeply dependent on us personally is we're selling too many things. And because the product and service line is so broad, it's very hard to find employees to deliver that group of products and services, because you forget you're the industry expert in your industry, right? You're the guru. You've been in the industry for years. The employees you hire generally have not been. And so they can't follow you that quickly. And so as a result, we have this broad list of products and services, and you, the owner, is the only one who knows how to deliver them all and how to sell them all. And as a result, you quickly reach what we call the ceiling complexity, where you can't go beyond that, whatever it is, $300,000 in revenue in Stephanie Breedlove's case, $1 million in revenue, $3 million in revenue, whatever. The secret to punching through those thresholds or those plateaus is actually selling fewer things to more people. So you've got to really scrutinize your product or service, list, and start to say, which of these products or services can I teach employees to deliver? Number one, teachable. Number two, are valuable to customers. In other words, they're not a commodity. We're really differentiated on this product or service. And number three, repeatable. There's some sort of recurring nature to customers' purchase habits. And so you're going to go through the process of looking at all your products and services and scoring them on how teachable, valuable, and repeatable they are. And then you're going to get rid of or de-emphasize those things that don't meet that TVR criteria. And that, ironically, is as bizarre as that is one of the first big steps to growing your top line revenue, is to selling fewer things to more people.
Yeah, it allows you to have those things become ancillary products.
Right. And again, it gives employees repetitions. With sales reps, oftentimes we get the question, I've tried to hire salespeople, but nobody does it as well as I do, the owner. I've tried to hire salespeople, but it doesn't really work. They don't really stick around. They don't hit their commission. We hear a lot about the fact they can't hire salespeople that are as good as the owner. And in part, unfortunately, the answer is looking in the mirror, because for many entrepreneurs, the reason that salespeople can't sell it is because they're not getting enough reps. They're not getting enough repetition, because they keep changing the product or service on that sales rep. And again, as entrepreneurs, we're used to the mental gymnastics required to make those changes and those shifts. Salespeople don't thrive on changes. They thrive on consistent products that are delivered consistently, that they can learn how to really talk about consistently over and over and over again. And that's a big part of module 2, in Value Builder, which is finding your teachable, valuable, repeatable product or service.
Excellent. Well said. And I'm going to add to it with one thing that I can definitely relate to. When you have salespeople that are selling multiple things, they become jack of all trades. They're not good at any one product, selling it, representing it, because they're trying to be so broad in what they understand about the company. What they want to be is a master of one, a very in-depth understanding of a particular product line, so that they can represent it with great deals of confidence and understanding. So I think what you just said is phenomenal. Thank you for sharing that. Now, you did comment when you were talking about business owners that can relate to this or have been examples of this. You spoke of businesses in different continents and countries. I want to just speak briefly about how this is very universal in the fact that these 8 drivers apply to businesses regardless of where they are nationally.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Whether you're a small town business, local retailer, in a regional center or in a large metropolis, we see the same factors driving company value. In fact, we're in 15 or 16 countries now. We have 700 advisors around the world: Australia, New Zealand, Canada, Ireland, of course, the United States, South Africa, blah, 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 et cetera, et cetera. And we see the same drivers hold true, because again, a buyer in Ireland thinks about the same things as a buyer in Chicago. They want to know, how sustainable are your earnings? How is your business going to thrive without you next year? And so it comes back to how will your business sort of succeed without you personally running it?
Exactly. And I give an analogy, since we're doing so well with analogies, of like a home. We talked about staging a home. Well, when you're appraising a home, I think there's some givens that are just expected. Is there running water? Is there electricity? Is there an outhouse, or is the home plumbed? And I think sometimes these are laughable because you're going to assume, well, of course that's the way it is. But in reality, there are instances where business owners forego some of the obvious because either they didn't know how, or they didn't feel the need to, or they got distracted with other things, and they built a business that may be missing some very key and important elements that if an outside person were to look in, they would be abhorred to see that they're running the business this way. And I unfortunately have run into situations where business owners are running a great business, but there's some odd element to their company that they just hold on to, either out of ignorance or out of simple neglect. They just don't want to focus on it. And that really sometimes is where the visit really gets dinged or knocked, because in the end, that's probably the Achilles heel of the company.
Yeah. We've been talking a lot about the housing analogy, and I think it holds up in many cases. Where it falls down is, in a housing context, much of the value of your home is going to be the neighborhood. It's going to be what streets you're on, what the schools are like, the crime rate, et cetera. That's going to be what drives the value of your home, more so than whether you have the right tiles on the ceiling and so forth. The analogy doesn't necessarily work quite as well for businesses on that point, because while industry will have some, the industry would be the equivalent of the neighborhood you're in. The industry you're in has some impact on the value of your business. But we see, again, example after example where industry companies in a specific industry, which generally have very low valuations, are getting very high valuations because of the quality of the business itself. The akin would be, you've got a home in a very bad neighborhood, but sells for a very high price. It doesn't usually happen because the neighborhood is so much more important than the actual bricks and mortar. Whereas in the case of a business, we can have examples where you're in an industry which the acquisition community has, for whatever reason, chosen to downplay, where it can get a very high valuation. I'll give you a very specific example of this. We got to know a company called Ruby Receptionists, run by a girl named Jill Nelson, a woman named Jill Nelson. $11 million in revenue. She's in the answering service business, right? An old school, very traditional business. Yet she was able to, and so a traditional business like hers might trade at, call it, 3 or 4 times pre-tax profit, right? So if she was making $1 million on her $11 million in revenue, you'd expect that business to trade for around $3 or $4 million. Well, she sold a majority stake in Ruby Receptionist recently for $43 million, almost 10 times what you would expect her business to sell for if all you were looking at was industry multiples. What Jill had done at Ruby was, as part of her answering service, she had created a routing technology which routed calls to her receptionists around the world. And that's what really became the sort of point of her business, which was very difficult to replicate, which got her such a high multiple for her business. And so I would just caution folks using the housing analogy, thinking selling a business is akin to selling a home. I think there are a lot of really good reasons to think about it that way. But that one element, I think, is one where we need to just proceed with a bit of caution, because we've seen, at least, companies in specific industries that are downplayed by acquirers can trade at very high multiples if the business is exceptional.
Well, first of all, thank you for bringing that up. I think the housing analogy is simply a conversational piece to try to give some context to this whole discussion. But you're right, because if we put this into the value builder context, there's the business score, and with that, we're able to give a specific score that's a cumulative of 8 drivers. Well, that then brings us to the business assessment, where we go into depth as to why those drivers are what they are and how each is either a strength or an opportunity within the business, and come up with action plans to actually improve and address each of those areas. But what you're bringing up now is we're also able to give an initial valuation of the business, a dollar amount for the company. And there's different things that actually play into that. And there are instances where a company may be perceived initially as as being worth less than it truly is. And what you're talking to is, I think, these examples of where the company did a great job of doing something unique, proprietary. They were in their industries standing out. And because of that, the multiple becomes much greater because they're more desirable, because they're so well organized as a company with something that's unique.
That's exactly right. That's exactly right. So when you complete the value bidder questionnaire and go through the assessment, you can actually get an estimate of value, which will show you not only what it's worth today, but if you focused on these 8 drivers and improved your score, how much incremental value you could capture. And usually, I mean, Roger, that's usually to the tune of certainly, hundreds of thousands, in many cases, millions of incremental dollars of potential value that can be captured by making what are important tweaks. I wouldn't say they're easy tweaks, but they're not necessarily huge changes of business strategy or changes of business model. Many times they're relatively easy things to implement that can have profound impacts on the overall value.
Yeah, so what we're talking about here are businesses that take the time to do the questionnaire. They find out overall how they're doing, but then they dive a little bit deeper and get the assessment, and they, as an owner, start to look at their business from an outside perspective. But then in the end, it's this initial valuation, this estimate that we're able to give them that's literally dollars, that we're able to say, this is financially what your company is worth. And what I loved you pointing out is the fact that we're also able to indicate, and with us working on these areas that need some improvement, here's the value that it can increase and even get to be more.
That's exactly right. Yeah, that's exactly right. So that's I think that's an important step for any owner. And again, it goes back to what we were talking about earlier. It doesn't mean you have to sell your business or that you even want to sell your business. Again, I open my investment account every month. They send me a letter saying, here's your stocks. It doesn't mean I want to sell them all. It just gives me a tremendous peace of mind to know that I'm building some assets outside of my business, and say, it gives me a sense of optimism when those assets go up. And I look at the trajectory of the line chart over 5 or 10 year period. It generally is going up with some blips, and that just gives me a sense of confidence. So I think it's worthwhile doing for sure.
So let me ask you this as we start winding this down. What are some advices you'd have for a business owner, having been through this process of owning a company and working now with other business owners? What's a good sound piece of advice that you'd give to a company owner as to what it is they ought to be doing in their business and not neglect?
Yeah, I mean, the first is to remember that every business owner will exit, right? And that the sooner we think about these issues, the more, the better that exit is going to be. One of my colleagues here was regaling a story for me about an entrepreneur who's, I think she's in her early 60s, based in Denver, and she's just had enough of her business, right? She's now been at it for decades, and she was talking about how does she exit, and the reality is she's tired, and she just doesn't have anything left in the tank to build this company up anymore. And as a result, it really isn't worth very much. She's here, reinvested all of her profits for decades, thinking that she was building an asset, but she's now sort of sitting on the precipice of needing to sell for health reasons and so forth. She doesn't have the energy to invest more time in it, but she hasn't done the hard lifting to get it ready to go to market. So my point in saying that is, again, whether you want to sell in 5 or 10 or 20 years, doing this work now kind of gets you ready. It's the ultimate insurance policy. If you ever decide one day to wake up and you say, I've had it, I want out, you've got a business that you can exit. If something terrible, tragic happens to you, you're not leaving an albatross to your kids or your spouse. It's a business that can thrive without you. And so, it's a bit of a tough lesson for us to communicate in many cases, because people do say, oh, I'll worry about that when I'm ready to sell. But in many cases, when you're ready to sell, it's too late. And so we'd really encourage you to start to think about these things now while you still got lots of energy, and you can apply 5, 10, 15 years to that process.
Yeah. Well, one of the things that I can definitely say, if not you, then who? You're the business owner. No one else is going to be able to work on the business like you. So this is definitely something that you need to put some attention to. And so we encourage all the business owners to take advantage of this. And so what I'm going to do is I'm going to share here a screenshot, if I can, of what we'd like to make as an offer. Basically what it is if you go to universalaccounting.com, and on Universal Accounting, right here in the center, build your business, the very first thing is build your score, your business score. And with your business score, it takes you to this page where you're able to actually request and get your business score. It takes a few minutes. And after filling out the questionnaire, you'll be able to get the report showing exactly how your business scores and what it is that you're actually doing within your company well, and where maybe some areas of opportunities lie. And we'll be happy to send you that free score to you after you've completed this, and give you a chance to actually see what's going on in your company. Obviously, from that, we could take some time to perhaps even go into the report, the business assessment report, and give you a chance to see that as well as provide you an initial valuation and give you that estimate of what your company truly is worth. So that is one of the things that I do want to stress, is that this is a chance for you to go online, go to universalaccounting.com, and in the navigation, go to your business score and request this information. Because what we want to do is we definitely just want to put you in a position where you're able to focus on things you need to be doing in your company to work on your business. And that's the whole key. So John, what would you like to just add as a final thought?
Well, I mean, just really this idea we started with, which is this notion that revenue and value are not the same thing. And for many of us, we sort of think our profit and loss statement at the end of the year, how much revenue do we have? How much revenue do we grow? It even becomes sort of boastful among entrepreneurs, like how much revenue do you have? Well, we've got 3 million. Well, we'll do 5 million this year. It becomes sort of the way we kind of size each other up as entrepreneurs. And what I just encourage you to remember, that there's an analogy that I'll coin a sort of spin on an old term. Revenue is vanity and value is sanity. Remember that what at the end of the day you really want to focus on is the value in your company, because that's what you can actually monetize, not your revenue. So I'll leave you with that phrase.
Well said and amen. John, I'm just going to simply say thank you for your time. I appreciate everything that you have, that you've offered to the business community, providing the Value Builder System. Built to Sell is a phenomenal book. I think it gives some perspective that every business owner needs to have about their own companies. And lastly, with regards to you as an individual, enjoy our conversations. You're a pleasant human being. And more importantly, I look forward to our seeing one another again in February. And I trust I'll see you here when you come out snowboarding or skiing. So thank you for your time. Everyone else, I appreciate your participation in this. I hope you found the discussion here worthwhile and applicable to your businesses as you focus on the things you need to do. Just know this, at Universal Accounting, we focus on helping business owners build their companies. And more importantly, if it's about business, it is universal. So thank you, take care, and have a wonderful day.
Thanks, Roger.